Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, Senior Writing Coach with Defend and Publish, and welcome to episode 26, Keeping Up with the Scholarly Literature Systems. So this is part one of a 2-episode series on scholarly literature and trying to keep up with all the sources that we need to read. And even though I'm calling it keeping up with the scholarly literature, I think we all know that it's not possible to keep up with all of it. There's so much scholarship that's produced out there, and you probably have several bodies of scholarship that you're looking at for all of your projects. So what I'm going to do today is to talk about a system that I have just so I make sure that I have a regular way to look for new literature on different research projects that I'm working on, and also a way to make sure that I'm capturing that information, because there really are a couple of parts that go with a system to deal with scholarly literature. One of them, of course, is making sure that you're regularly going to find it. But the other thing is, once you do find it, you have a systematic way to take it for your projects, to store it somewhere, to make sure that you can access it again. And so I'm going to walk through a very simple system that I've been using for a long time that just makes sure that I've got the new pieces of scholarship kind of coming into my work, and I'm not forgetting about new things that might be out there. But it's also not a system that's so overwhelming or has lots of different parts. So for this episode, if you're just listening to this on audio, I am showing my process on the screen, but I'll describe how I'm doing it as well. So it'll work totally fine as an audio file. But for those of you watching it on YouTube, you're going to actually get to see a screenshot of how it actually works. And of course, you can check out screenshots and show notes as well. So let me share my screen with everyone. Give me just 1 second here. All right. Okay, so what we are looking at are just a couple of quick slides that talk about my system. And the screenshots that I'm showing, again, you can see these pictures in the show notes if you're just listening to this on audio, but hopefully it will make sense as I describe it. Okay, so first part to having a system is obviously to have a system to keep up. And a system, just by its very nature, is going to be something regular that you're doing in a way that you don't have to think about it all the time. So we might call this a habit. Part of being an academic is being involved in scholarship and reading the literature and doing your own research in that. So the research portion of scholarly writing is something that I think is a little bit mysterious. People do this in all different ways, and particularly our reading practices. So I mentioned that I am going to talk about scholarly reading and scholarly literature for the next 2 episodes. So this is the first one about a system, and then the second one is about how to actually do the reading in a way that's sustainable. So for the system, this is the system that I have. I really have just 3 easy steps to it. One is that I have decided that I'm going to engage with scholarly literature every week, but I'm only going to do it for half an hour. And what I'm doing during that half an hour is just finding the material that I might want and then capturing it in some way. This is not the time that I'm actually doing the scholarly reading. So this little half-hour portion that I do, I have just set it up so every Thursday morning when I'm having my morning coffee, I just have a half hour that I start with this for my academic work for the day. And what I'm doing during this half hour, the system that works for me, is I'm doing 2 things. One, I am going to one of the journal websites that I read regularly. So I do have print subscriptions, which I will say something about those. I'll leave a little note to say something about that at the end. But even with print subscriptions, I will go to a journal's website and just take a look at their latest issue and browse through their tables of contents. And every week I'll pick a different journal to do that. So probably many of us have, say, 4 or 5 journals that we read regularly. Maybe you only have 1 or 2, depending on your subfield. But for me, I would say there's about 5 that I want to read regularly. I want to see the articles that are in there. And some of these I do have print subscriptions to. But that doesn't mean, as we all know, and I wish I had one right here to show everybody on the video, but I think we all probably have a print subscription laying around that's still in the plastic that you haven't taken your journal issue out. So this is a way that I just make sure I scan very quickly what is in there electronically. The other thing that I'll do during that half hour time, and I'm going to walk through some screenshots of this in a second, is just to use some keywords in a scholarly database. For me, the keywords I use almost every time are either faculty writing, because that's the area of research that I do, or academic writing practices, or something like that. Sometimes I'll mix up my keywords every week. So what the two touch points for me are really just checking out one journal's website, browsing through the latest issue or latest issues if I'm really behind on that one. And then the second one is just throw some keywords in a scholarly database and just take a quick look and see what was out there. The last part of that system then is to use and store whatever I find during that half hour. So the takeaway from my actual system, and like I said, I'll walk through those parts in a second, is that it takes a half hour. What I'm doing is going to two specific locations, one journal's website, just to browse to browse a table of contents, and then putting some keywords in a scholarly database and looking to see what's in there. Sometimes I never make it to the scholarly database. And, if I find a really good, say I've come across a special issue on my topic, there might be like 4 articles in there I want to look at. But in general, the system has really worked well for me because it's ensuring that I'm looking in 2 particular spots, one in the actual journal, one in the database, because some of the journals that I'm reading, and I'm finding this more and more as more scholarly journals are getting out there, not all of them are in, say, Academic Search Complete or in, some of the scientific databases. You've really got to kind of look in both spots, and there's still other places to look. But for me, I've just chosen to limit it to those 2. So let's talk about then how that works. So on the screen, what I'm showing folks that are watching on YouTube is what I just did this morning. Even when I'm recording this episode, it is Thursday morning. So what I do is I went to the Journal of Scholarly Publishing, because that's one of the journals I read. I do subscribe to it. I do get print issues. But yes, those are still probably sitting somewhere in a pile of mail. I have not even looked at it yet. So I know I want to look at it. And so what I do is just go to their website. They have a button on there that says Browse Issues. I go get it. I click on a specific issue number and then just drop down the table of contents for that issue. One of the things that I came across, and for audio listeners, I want to make sure that I say this, is the latest issue that came out in April is all about writing a book. And so one of the articles in there is about how to revise a dissertation into a book. And another one is about how to use your book proposal to rethink your book. So I highly recommend, I didn't expect to stumble on this morning, but I highly recommend checking out Journal of Scholarly Publishing, the April 2021 issue, if you're a doctoral student or even if you're a new faculty member looking to revise a dissertation into a book, because there's a lot in there that's helpful tips. But anyway, so I discovered that this morning, and I am interested in this area of research. So I just happened to stumble upon this issue. But what I end up doing is I look around, see if I like anything. Sometimes I don't, and then I might go to another issue. I might be able to look at a couple of issues, just to know, okay, in that journal, I have checked out to see what is available to me. And as I mentioned, if nothing's there, then I'll move on. I'll start doing some digging in a scholarly database. And I should say a word about time at this point. I think we all know when you start digging around in either the journal websites or the scholarly databases, you can go very quickly down a rabbit hole of research, and then time gets sucked out of your hourglass and you've spent like 3 or 4 hours looking. That still happens to me, even with sort of the disciplined, regular habit of just doing a quick look to see what's out there every Thursday morning. So I do set a timer on my phone. And no matter what is happening at that half-hour mark, I'll just stop, because I know that that's going to be something that takes a lot of time, and I don't want to fall into the habit of spending all the time finding the research, but never actually like carrying it over to my writing projects and moving my writing projects forward. So this particular Thursday morning, I went and reviewed this latest issue. I found an article that I liked, and the one that I was looking at was the one about revising a dissertation into a book, because I'm currently working on an article about graduate students' transition from doctoral students to faculty writers. And this seems to be a cornerstone piece. So I'm very interested in this. So the next thing I'll do is actually click on the article, open up the abstract. So this is something probably a lot of us do, just to check out, do I want this? Gave it a quick read. And then the next thing that I did is I opened up the PDF, and all I did at this point was I did a very fast skim read. And I was quick. I just looked very quickly to see, is this something new that I don't already have? Is this something that I might use in a different way? And having it open as a PDF allowed me to do some copying and pasting. And so what I did was I looked through and looked around to see if there was anything that was useful. And it could be a whole paragraph, it could be a quote, it could be anything that was in there. I cut and paste, and then I drop it in immediately to the document that goes with. So the project that I'm working on was this article about this graduate student transition. So I took this one part of an article, I have it on the screen so you can see just a little snippet of a literal cut and paste. I take that and I drop it into the article, but also I put the citation in there. So I know where I found it. I know what page it was on. I also know it was a quote. So the way that it was dropped in, I can see that. The other part of it is if I actually take something from an article that I'm going to use later when I start doing some writing with that article, I also make sure to take the reference right then and there and drop it into the references page for that project. So if you have a citation manager, you might have another way to do this better. This is just the way that I do it. So when I have a Microsoft Word document open, I'm in the middle of an article, and I see, ooh, that would be really good to get in my article. I'll just take that piece of information, copy, paste, drop it in. I'm not going to leave it like that. So, we're not talking about plagiarism here or anything like that. I'm just dropping it and putting it in as a reminder to myself to work that into the writing when I get to a writing session. So this is one of the ways that I make sure that the reading that I'm finding actually transfers into the writing project that I'm doing. And so just by this very quick skim read, do I want this? Grab what I want, drop it into the project it goes with, so I know that I can get to it later along with the citation, so I can find it and I know the context. Sometimes I'll even copy a whole paragraph, drop it in there so I have the context around it, and then also look at the references. Now, one of the things that at this point I always say to graduate students when I talk about the system is I am still going to go back and decide if I want that when I get to a writing session. And if I do, I will look at that scholarly journal article again in more depth, particularly to get the context around that. You never ever want to drop quotes in without context or anything like that. But all I'm saying is it's just a quick signal to me that I want this when I get to a writing session. So that's the way that I'm capturing it. And then same thing with the references. If I don't end up using the source, then I will, in the references, just cut it off of there when I'm finished. So it's just a way to make sure I'm using some of the most up-to-date scholarly literature when I get there. The other thing that I will do is if I have any time, I will go in a scholarly database and search for faculty writing or, academic writing or academics writing processes. There's lots of words I use. You may have similar keywords that you use. I then will go and see what articles are out there. So this morning, I did find one article about faculty burnout, and I'm really interested in that aspect as well in terms of how, faculty that are super burned out from COVID and all the things that have happened there in terms of our workloads and our personal lives. I'm very interested in that and what impact that's having on writing. So I found this really cool article that I would like to look at. And again, I do the same thing. I open up the PDF that's there, copy, paste what I want, grab the citation and that's again just a little note that is going to go into a project. Now, this particular topic I don't have on a project anywhere. I don't have a document to drop it in, but I do have an academic tracking system that I have just a chart where I have little ideas, and I'm going to put this information in that chart in that space. So I will do something with academic charting and tracking processes and all that in a future episode. But I wanted to say something about, well, what do you do if you find something really cool that's for a future project you've never even made a document for? There's a couple of ways you can do it. You can actually start that project by just making a Microsoft Word document, dropping this information in, and hey, you've just started at least some preliminary research for a project. You could definitely do that. I just take these pieces and drop them into my tracking chart that goes along with just ideas that I have. So this particular article, I will have some information in the chart in that way. And as I mentioned, I'll say that in a future episode. So really, as I mentioned, the system really has these parts, right? You've got a system that to keep up or to frequently have touch points with your scholarly literature. But then the second part of that is making sure that you're capturing and storing that information. One of the things that I've mentioned in a previous episode about trying the technology tools, so if you go find that episode that says try tech tools, I mentioned a tool called ScholarC, and this is a product that actually makes little flashcards with scholarly, it basically summarizes a scholarly article for you with some scholarly flashcards. And I'm going to talk about that ScholarC product next week as part of the second episode about how to do some of this kind of skim reading and deep reading that we might do with keeping up with academic literature. But I just wanted to mention it here because that could be another tool you use within your half hour kind of looking around time. If you want to actually do if you're not somebody that can skim read on the fly, grab a quote, drop it into a Microsoft Word document, this may be another tool that would be useful for this process. So one of the things I'd encourage you to do in closing to think about for this week is, can you find a spot on your calendar where you can give yourself a half hour or maybe an hour if you want to be a little bit more leisurely about it, just to check out different scholarly pieces of literature every week. So as I mentioned, every week I look at a different journal. I try different keywords in the database. And no, I am not capturing everything, but it is a way for me to keep up with some of the latest scholarship that's out there. And then I don't have that fear of missing out that I did not cite, the most current literature or that I'm forgetting something. It is a good way to check on everything. So have a great week, and I look forward to sharing with you more on scholarly literature and keeping up next week.